Okay, so let's get into this. We're talking about a man today who is, well, he's basically a global phenomenon from the 19th century.
He really is. Usually when we do these deep dives, the figure is famous in, one country or maybe one field.
Right, like a scientist or a politician. But this guy, his name is everywhere. I mean, you walk through any Italian town, you're going to find a Via Garibaldi or a Piazza Garibaldi.
Absolutely. And statues of him are in squares from New York City to Buenos Aires. Yeah. It's incredible.
And for our listeners in the UK, yes, there is that popular biscuit named after him, which is, a very specific kind of fame.
And let's not forget the Garibaldi fish, bright orange state fish of California. Very territorial, apparently.
A biscuit and a fish. We are, of course, talking about Giuseppe Garibaldi, and the mission for this deep dive is, I think, pretty clear. We've got this pile of sources, biographies, letters, historical accounts, and we really want to figure out how one man manages to be a sailor, a candle maker on Staten Island,
Yeah, that part is wild.
a guerrilla fighter in Brazil, and then, almost like a side project, unifies the entire nation of Italy with a volunteer army.
It is a staggering resume. I think the real mystery we need to unpack is the gap between the legend and the man. You see a big marble statue of a general on a horse, and you just assume he was part of the
So you
establishment.
assume he was an aristocrat, went to all the right military schools.
Exactly. A rigid, formal military guy. But Garibaldi was the complete opposite of that. He was a revolutionary, an outsider, a pirate in the eyes of some governments. He was, in a way, a global citizen before that was even really a concept.
He's often called the hero of the two worlds.
That's the one. And it's not just some clever marketing slogan. It's literally true. He was a major figure in both South America and Europe. And the people who admired him, I mean, you have Abraham Lincoln on one side and Che Guevara on the other.
Wow. That is a very, very wide spectrum of admiration.
It's almost impossible to think of anyone else who bridges that kind of gap.
So let's go all the way back. Where does a character like this even come from? Because, like you said, he just doesn't fit the mold of a 19th century European leader.
He really doesn't. He was born in 1807 in Nice. And right there, from the very start, you have this identity question that I think explains a lot about him.
How so?
Well, when he was born, Nice was under French control. Napoleon was running Europe. But the people there, their culture, their language, it was Italian, specifically Ligurian, from that coastal region.
So he's born on this cultural fault line between France and Italy.
Precisely. And he wasn't born into money or power. His family was in the coastal trade. His father was a merchant sailor. So the sea was in his blood from day one. He didn't go to a fancy military academy. His school was the Mediterranean Sea.
So his early 20s are spent on merchant ships.
Yeah, sailing to places like Istanbul, to Tunis, to Taganrog in Russia on the Sea of Azov. He's a working-class sea captain.
It sounds romantic, but I'm guessing the reality was pretty gritty.
Extremely. But it gave him a worldview that was much bigger than just his small corner of Europe. And the really pivotal moment happens in 1833. He's in Taganrog, of all places, and he meets this political exile who introduces him to the ideas of Giuseppe Mazzini.
And Mazzini is the guy you can't avoid in this story. He's sort of the intellectual engine of Italian unification, right?
He's the soul of it. Mazzini was the prophet, the dreamer. He founded this secret society called Young Italy, and his vision was for a unified Republican Italy. No kings, no popes, no Austrian emperors running the north, just a single nation of the people.
And this must have been electrifying for a young guy like Garibaldi who was looking for a purpose.
It was exactly what he was looking for, a cause bigger than hauling cargo.
Right.
He meets Mazzini in person in Marseille, he takes the oath, joins Young Italy, and he just jumps in with both feet.
And by jumps in, we mean he immediately gets involved in what the authorities would call treason.
High treason, yeah.
Yeah.
A year later, in 1834, he takes part in a Mazzinian plot to start a mutiny in the Navy of Piedmont, Sardinia.
And how did that go?
It was a complete disaster. The plot was discovered before it even really got started. Garibaldi had to flee for his life. He disguised himself as a peasant, snuck out of the city, and a court in Genoa sentenced him to death in absentia.
So he's 27 years old, and he's a fugitive with a death sentence. It's a tough start to a revolutionary career.
It is. It means you can't go home. You are an outlaw. So he does what a lot of desperate, idealistic Europeans with death sentences did back then. He gets on a ship and sails for South America.
And this starts what the outline calls his training ground.
It's his 14-year exile. And I really want to stress this. This wasn't him just, lying low and waiting for things to blow over. This was his boot camp. This is where Giuseppe Garibaldi, the sailor,
Yeah.
becomes Garibaldi, the general.
He gets there and almost immediately finds a war to join.
Of course he does. He ends up in Brazil, and he gets involved in the Ragamuffin War.
The Ragamuffin War. That sounds like something from a children's book.
The name is deceptive. It was a vicious 10-year separatist war. The province of Rio Grande do Sul was trying to break away from the Brazilian Empire and form its own republic. The rebels were called ragamuffins, basically because they were poor ranchers and cowboys.
And Garibaldi joins them. Why? What's in it for him?
Because they were Republicans.
Mm.
They were fighting an empire. For him, it was the same fight as in Italy, just on a different continent. And this is where he learns the very specific style of fighting that will make him a legend.
Which is what, exactly? Because he's not commanding a traditional army with lines of infantry.
It's asymmetrical warfare. It's guerrilla tactics. He's leading small bands of men on horseback across the pampas, the huge plains. He learns how to fight when you're outnumbered and outgunned. He learns how to use the terrain for ambushes, how to move fast, how to strike, and then just vanish.
It's a completely different skill set from European warfare at the time.
A whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
And maybe the most important thing he learns is how to lead volunteers. These men aren't paid soldiers. They aren't conscripts. They follow him out of sheer loyalty.
Because he's charismatic.
Partly, but it's more than that. It's because he suffers with them. If they're sleeping on the wet ground, so is he. If they're hungry, he's hungry. He leads from the front, always. That creates a bond that no amount of money can buy.
Now, during this time in Brazil, he meets someone who becomes central to his entire life story. We have to talk about Anita.
We absolutely do. Ana Maria de Jesus Ribeiro, Anita. In so many historical biographies, the wife is just sort of a background character. Anita Garibaldi was a co-star.
Okay, tell us about her. How did they meet?
He first saw her from his ship in the port of Laguna in 1839. According to his memoirs, it was just, love at first sight. He saw her through his telescope and just knew. She was a local woman, fierce, independent. She was actually unhappily married to someone else at the time, but she just left everything to be with him and join the cause. I mean, when I say join, I mean it. She didn't just stay behind and wait for him.
The notes say she actually fought.
She fought. She was on his ship, the Rio Pardo, during battles. She would carry ammunition to the cannons while under fire. She was captured once and escaped by stealing a horse and riding through the wilderness for days to find him.
That's the stuff of movies.
It really is. She was an incredible horsewoman, and she actually taught Garibaldi about the culture of the gauchos, the South American cowboys.
Wait a minute. So the iconic image we have of Garibaldi, the poncho, the loose-fitting shirt, the neckerchief, that whole look?
That's the gaucho look. That's pure South America. Anita introduced him to that world, to that way of life. He adopted that style of dress and kept it for the rest of his life.
That's fascinating. So he's consciously creating an image.
Yes, it was his brand. It's a visual signal to everyone that said, I am not one of those stiff European generals in a tight uniform. I am a man of the people, a man of action.
So the rebellion in Brazil eventually fails, and they have to move on.
Right. They move to Uruguay, to Montevideo. They finally get married there in 1842. But of course, peace doesn't last. Uruguay was in the middle of a brutal civil war, fighting against an Argentine dictator, Rosas, who was trying to take over.
And Garibaldi gets a new job.
He takes command of the tiny Uruguayan fleet, and more importantly, he raises a new volunteer force made up of Italian exiles living in Montevideo. He calls it the Italian Legion.
And this is the origin story of the famous Redshirts. I love this detail because I always assumed it was, something deeply symbolic, red for the blood of martyrs, that sort of thing.
The reality is so much better. It's just a story of supply chain logistics. Garibaldi needed to find uniforms for his legion, but he had no money. They were broke.
So what do?
They found a textile factory in Montevideo that had a massive unsold shipment of red wool smocks.
And who are these smocks originally for?
They were intended for the slaughterhouse workers in Argentina.
You're kidding.
Nope. They were dyed bright red to hide the blood stains from butchering cattle.
That is unbelievably grim and amazing.
It is. But Garibaldi took them because they were available and they were cheap. And then, as so often happens with him, the practical choice becomes this iconic symbol. Those slaughterhouse shirts became the uniform of liberty.
And they were highly visible on the battlefield.
Which was part of their power. It was a bold statement. It said, we are here. We are not hiding. Come and get us.
The Legion also had a flag, right? A black flag.
Yes, a black flag with a volcano in the center. The symbolism there was that Italy was in mourning, under oppression, but with this dormant power, this volcano, ready to erupt.
So his legend is growing in South America. There's a great anecdote in the notes about an enemy admiral, an Irishman named William Brown.
Yes, Admiral William Brown, who was commanding the Argentine fleet. He was Garibaldi's opponent. In one naval engagement, he had Garibaldi's ship totally outgunned and cornered.
So he could have just destroyed him.
Easily. But Garibaldi fought with such insane bravery and skill that Brown, instead of finishing him off, intentionally let him slip away.
Why on earth would he do that?
Professional respect. Brown reportedly told his officers, "Let him escape. That gringo is a brave man. When the enemy commander starts rooting for you, you know you're doing something right."
Okay, so by 1848, he's a living legend in South America. But back in Europe, the political situation is exploding.
The whole continent is on fire.
Yeah.
1848 is the year of revolutions. There are uprisings in France, Austria, Germany, Hungary, and all across Italy. It's the moment everyone has been waiting for.
And Garibaldi hears the news.
He hears the news, and he knows it's time to go home. He gathers about 60 veterans from his Italian legion, packs up the Redshirts, puts Anita and their children on a boat, and sails back to Nice.
This brings us to part 2, the return and the romantic defeat. So he arrives back in Italy. You would think the leaders of the Italian independence movement would just roll out the red carpet.
You'd think they'd be thrilled. Here he is, our experienced guerrilla general. Please, take command.
But that's not what happened.
Not at all. Politics is never that simple. The main force fighting the Austrians in the north is the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia, led by King Charles Albert.
And the king does not trust Garibaldi.
He's terrified of him. Garibaldi's a radical. He's a known Republican. He's a friend of Mazzini. The king isn't fighting for a democracy. He's fighting to expand his own kingdom. So Garibaldi, to him, is a dangerous loose cannon.
So when Garibaldi offers his services,
The king treats him with what's described as coolness and distrust. He basically gives him a minor, insignificant command to keep him out of the way.
which for a man like Garibaldi must have been infuriating.
Deeply. So he just ignores the king and goes off to fight for the provisional government in Milan. But the main event of this period happens the next year, in 1849, in the city of Rome.
The Roman Republic. This is one of the great tragic episodes of Italian history.
It's the defining moment of this whole revolutionary wave. The Pope, Pius IX, is forced to flee Rome. In his absence, a radical republic is declared. Mazzini arrives and becomes one of its leaders, and Garibaldi is asked to organize the city's defense.
But who are they defending against? Not the Austrians this time.
No, against the French, which is deeply ironic.
France was a republic then too, right?
It was. But its new president, Louis Napoleon, the future Emperor Napoleon III, needed to win the support of French Catholics. So, as a cynical political move, he sends a massive French army to crush the Roman Republic and restore the Pope to power.
So it's one republic sending an army to destroy another.
Exactly, and it sets up this epic showdown. You have a professional, well-equipped French army against Garibaldi's force, which is this motley collection of volunteers, students, artists, and veterans.
But on April 30th, 1849, the impossible happens.
A miracle. The French army attacked the walls of Rome at the port of San Pancrazio, expecting to just walk right in. And Garibaldi, using his guerrilla instincts, launches a surprise bayonet charge. He uses the terrain, flanks them, and completely routs them. He drives a superior French army back in humiliation. It was a stunning victory.
But the French are a major power. They're not just going to pack up and go home.
No, they just send more troops, tens of thousands more. They lay siege to the city. And for a month, Garibaldi and his men hold them off in some of the most brutal fighting in the century. It was hand-to-hand combat in the villas and gardens on the edge of the city.
But they were just outnumbered and outgunned.
Overwhelmingly. By the end of June, the French have breached the walls. The city is about to fall.
And this leads to this incredible scene in the Roman assembly. The politicians are all debating whether to surrender or fight to the death in the streets.
And in the middle of this debate, the doors swing open and Garibaldi walks in. Imagine the scene. He's covered in blood and dust and sweat. His sword is bent. His poncho is torn. He walks into the middle of the chamber and he tells them there's a third option. We do not surrender. We leave. And he delivers this absolutely iconic line. He says, "Dovunque noi saremo, la sarà Roma." Wherever we will go, that will be Rome.
Wow. He's saying that Rome isn't a place, it's an idea. It's the people who carry the flame of the Republic.
Exactly. It's one of the most powerful ideas in the history of nationalism.
Yeah.
But the reality of that retreat was an absolute nightmare.
This is the epic retreat.
He leaves the city with about 4,000 volunteers, heading north, hoping to spark a rebellion elsewhere. But they are being hunted. Not by one army, but by four. The French, the Austrians, the Spanish, and the Neapolitans are all closing in on him.
It's a death march, basically.
It is. They're crossing the Apennine Mountains in the brutal summer heat. They have no food, no water. Men are deserting or dying every day. And this is where the personal tragedy for Garibaldi becomes almost unbearable.
Anita was with him.
Anita was with him. She was pregnant with their fifth child. She was desperately ill, probably with malaria, but she had refused to leave his side.
And the retreat was just too much for her.
It was too much. Near the coast, around the Kamaki lagoons, her condition worsened catastrophically. She died in his arms in a farmhouse.
He couldn't even give her a proper burial.
He couldn't. The Austrian patrols were minutes away. He and a friend had to hastily bury her in a shallow grave in the sand and just keep running to save the handful of men he had left.
I can't even imagine.
He wrote later that he felt a part of his soul died there. He eventually managed to escape Italy on a fishing boat, but he was a broken man. He'd lost Rome, he'd lost his army, and now he'd lost his wife.
For most people, that would be the end of the story. You just disappear, give up.
Which is what makes what happens next so remarkable. This brings us to part 3 of our story, the blue-collar interlude. Because he doesn't retire. He goes into exile again. But he doesn't go live in a fancy villa in London. He goes to Staten Island, New York.
This is the part of the story that always just blows my mind. The hero of two worlds, the defender of Rome, is living in New York City.
Arrived in 1850, and he needed a job. So he moved in with an Italian inventor, Antonio Meucci.
Meucci, the man who many people say invented the telephone before Alexander Graham Bell.
That's the one. And Meucci owned a candle factory on Staten Island, and Giuseppe Garibaldi went to work for him.
So if you were a New Yorker in 1850 and you bought a candle, it might have been hand-dipped by the most famous revolutionary general in the world.
It's entirely possible. He lived very simply. He wore regular work clothes. He'd go fishing. He took the ferry over to Manhattan to meet with other exiles and visit Masonic lodges, but he refused all charity. He insisted on earning his own keep.
That humility is such a core part of his character, isn't it?
It's what makes him so different. He wasn't addicted to the power or the fame. He was addicted to the cause. And when the cause was on hold, he was just Giuseppe, the candle maker.
But he couldn't sit still for long. The
Yeah.
sea was calling him back.
He was too restless. In 1851, he leaves New York and decides to go back to his first profession. He travels to Central America using the alias Giuseppe Payne.
Joseph Bread.
I know, it's so humble.
That's amazing.
And he gets a job as a merchant captain. He takes command of a ship called the Carmen in Peru. And his cargo for this grand voyage, guano, bird droppings for fertilizer. He sails a ship full of bird droppings from Peru across the Pacific to China.
This is a man who had commanded armies.
Exactly. From China, he goes to Manila. Then he sails around Australia and New Zealand. He basically circumnavigates the globe as a cargo ship captain.
And there's a great story about a stop he made in England, in Newcastle.
Yes, on Tyneside. On a later voyage, he sails a ship called the Commonwealth, carrying coal into Newcastle. By this point, his fame is spread, and the reception he gets is just wild.
Who comes to greet him?
The working men of the city, the coal miners, the shipbuilders. They saw him as one of them, a working-class hero. They collected money among themselves and presented him with this beautiful, inscribed sword as a gift.
But he shuns the official welcome, right?
Completely. The local dignitaries, the mayor, the wealthy merchants, they invited him to a grand banquet in his honor. And Garibaldi politely declined. He said he would rather stay and share a meal with the workers who had welcomed him.
That's just quintessential Garibaldi, class solidarity. He knew who his people were.
Always. So after years of wandering, he finally returns to Italy in 1854. He saved up a bit of money, and he buys half of a small, rocky, remote island off the coast of Sardinia, the island of Caprera. And he becomes a farmer. He thinks he's finally done.
But history has other plans for him. The 1850s are drawing to a close, and the stage is being set for the main event.
We are approaching 1860, the miracle year. But to really understand what happens in 1860, we have to talk about a deep political betrayal that happened a year earlier in 1859.
And this involves the Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, Count Cavour.
Camillo Benso, Count of Cavour, the political mastermind of Italian unification. He's the pragmatist, the schemer. While Garibaldi is the sword and Mazzini is the soul, Cavour is the brain.
And Cavour makes a deal with the devil, so to speak.
He makes a deal with Napoleon III of France. Cavour needs French military help to drive the Austrians out of northern Italy. In a secret deal, he promises that in exchange for that help, he will give France 2 territories, Savoy and Poitou.
Nice.
Garibaldi's hometown.
City where he was born. Imagine fighting your whole life for the unification of your country, only to find out that the prime minister has traded your hometown to a foreign power like a poker chip.
He must have been incandescent with rage.
He was beyond furious. He stood up in the parliament and attacked Cavour, saying, "You have made me a foreigner in my own land." It created a lifelong grudge. But ironically, this betrayal actually freed Garibaldi to act.
How so?
Well, Cavour and the king couldn't really give him orders anymore. He wasn't technically their subject. He was a man without a country, a free agent. And that freedom is what allowed him to launch the single most daring and famous exploit of his entire life, the Expedition of the Thousand.
This is the big one, the climax of the action movie. It's May 1860. Set the scene for us. A revolt has broken out in Sicily against the Bourbon king of the two Sicilies, who rules the entire south of Italy from Naples. Garibaldi decides he has to go and help them.
But Cavour is against this, right? He thinks it's too risky.
Cavour is officially against it, but he kind of unofficially lets it happen. It's very complicated. Garibaldi gathers volunteers in Genoa. He gets about 1,000 of them.
And who are these 1,000? Are they elite soldiers?
Not at all. It's a real motley crew. They're students, doctors, lawyers, artists, a few old veterans from 1849. Most of them have never fired a gun in their lives. They're wearing their red shirts. They have old, rusty muskets.
And they need to get to Sicily, so they need ships.
So they basically hijack, with a lot of winking and nodding from the shipping company, two old paddle steamers, the Piemonte and the Lombardo. And in the middle of the night, they sail south.
The odds here just seem insane. He's got 1,000 amateurs. The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies has a professional army of over 100,000 men and a proper navy.
On paper, it is a suicide mission. It should not have worked. They managed to dodge the Neapolitan navy and land at Marsala on the western coast of Sicily. They march inland and meet the enemy army on a hill called Calatafimi.
The Battle of Calatafimi. This is the moment where everything could have gone wrong.
It's the turning point of Italian history. Garibaldi has maybe 800 effective fighters left. He is facing 1,500 Neapolitan regular troops who are dug in on the high ground. They are better armed, better trained. They have cannons.
And what does Garibaldi do?
He orders an uphill bayonet charge.
That's madness.
It seems like it. But he knew their only chance was to close the distance. Their old muskets were useless in a firefight. And he used the terrain with genius. The hill was terraced for farming, with these little stone walls, so his men would charge up one terrace, duck behind the wall to catch their breath and reload, and then charge up to the next one.
There's a famous quote from this battle, isn't there?
Yes. At one point, the fighting is so intense, his second-in-command, Nino Bixio, says they should retreat. And Garibaldi looks at him and says, "No, qui si fa l'Italia, o si muore." Here we either make Italy or we die.
And they made Italy.
They took the hill.
Yeah.
The Neapolitan troops, who weren't expecting this kind of ferocious, almost suicidal attack, just panicked and broke. And once Garibaldi won that first battle, the psychological dam just burst.
Sicilians started to believe that the king's army could actually be beaten.
Exactly. Volunteers started flocking to join him. His army swelled. He captures the capital, Palermo, after 3 days of street fighting. He crosses the strait to the mainland. He marches north towards Naples.
And this is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. He takes the enemy capital, Naples, not with an army, but by taking a train.
It feels like something out of a myth, but it's true. He was so confident he left his main army behind and just got on a public train into the city with a handful of his staff officers.
And the Neapolitan army didn't stop him.
The forts were still manned. The artillery was aimed at the train station. They could have obliterated him. But the soldiers and the population were so completely awestruck by his legend and his audacity that no one fired a shot. He got off the train, walked into the city square, and the entire city just erupted in celebration. The King of Naples had already fled.
So in just a few months, he's done it. He has conquered the entire southern half of Italy. He is, for all intents and purposes, the dictator of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies.
He is, and this creates a massive philosophical crisis.
Yeah.
Garibaldi is a Republican. He hates monarchy, but he has just conquered half a country in the name of King Victor Emmanuel II.
And now he has to decide what to do next.
This is the moment of truth. Mazzini is begging him, declare a republic in the south, march on Rome. But Cavour and the king are marching down from the north with the Piedmontese army because they are terrified that Garibaldi is going to start a war with France over Rome and bring all of Europe down on them.
So Garibaldi is caught in the middle. He has a choice. He can fight the Piedmontese army and start a civil war for his Republican ideals, or he can surrender his conquests to a king he doesn't like in the name of unity.
and he chooses unity. On October 26, 1860, he rides out to meet the king near the town of Teano. It's this famous scene, the handshake at Teano.
Describe it for us.
It's a misty morning. Garibaldi and his red-shirted volunteers ride up to the king and his uniformed professional army. Garibaldi takes off his hat and he shouts, "Saluto il primo re d'Italia." I salute the first king of Italy.
In that one moment, he gives it all away. He hands over half a country.
It is one of the most remarkable acts of selflessness in modern history. Think of how many conquerors would have done that. Caesar didn't. Napoleon didn't. Garibaldi handed over absolute power.
And how did the king reward him?
The king was polite but cold. He basically said, "Thank you very much, we'll take it from here." He sidelined Garibaldi almost immediately. He held a review of Garibaldi's volunteer army and then just disbanded most of them without incorporating them into the new Italian army.
That has to have been a slap in the face.
It was a deep, deep wound for Garibaldi and his men. The establishment had used them and was now discarding them. Garibaldi refused all rewards. They offered him titles, estates, a huge pension. He turned it all down.
So what did he take?
He asked for a year's supply of macaroni and a bag of seed corn for his farm. He got on a boat and sailed back to his rocky island of Caprera.
He went home to plant his crops after creating a nation.
It's what cements the legend of Cincinnatus, the Roman general who saved the Republic and then went back to his plow. But, and this is a recurring theme with him, he still wasn't done.
Which brings us to part 5, post-unification. Because Italy was unified, but the map still had a big hole in the middle.
Rome. The city was still ruled by the Pope and protected by a garrison of French troops. And for Garibaldi, an Italy without Rome wasn't Italy. But before he turns his attention back to Rome, there's this fascinating detour involving the American Civil War.
Right, 1861. The Civil War breaks out in the United States. The Union is desperate for experienced military commanders.
And Garibaldi is the most famous freedom fighter in the world. So President Lincoln, through his Secretary of State, William Seward, officially offers Garibaldi a command in the Union Army, the rank of Major General.
An incredible offer. Why didn't he accept?
He had conditions, and they were pure Garibaldi. First, he said he would only accept if he was made Commander-in-Chief of the entire Union Army.
Wow, okay, that's bold opening did. I'll help you out, but I have to be in charge of everything.
It's audacious. But the second condition is the really important one, the one that tells you everything about his ideology. He demanded that Lincoln make the immediate and total abolition of slavery the explicit primary war aim.
And in 1861, Lincoln wasn't ready to do that.
Not yet. Politically, he couldn't. At that point, the war was officially about preserving the Union, not ending slavery. So the negotiations fell through. Garibaldi declined.
And he kept watching.
He watched very closely. And when Lincoln did issue the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Garibaldi wrote him this beautiful letter, praising him and calling him the heir of the cause of Christ. He saw the fight against slavery as the exact same struggle as the fight for national liberation in Italy.
So back in Italy, he gets restless again. He can't let the Roman question go.
He can't. He raises a new army of volunteers with the terrifyingly simple slogan, Roma o morte, Rome or death.
And this leads to one of the most tragic and ironic episodes of his life, Aspromonte in 1862.
He starts marching north towards Rome. But the new Italian government, the very government he created, is terrified of a war with France. So they do the unthinkable. They send the new Italian army to stop him.
The king sends his army to stop the man who gave him the kingdom.
It's a heartbreaking betrayal. The two armies meet in the mountains of Aspromonte in the south. The regular army opens fire on the volunteers.
And what does Garibaldi do?
He stands up on a rock in line of fire and yells at his men, "Don't shoot! They are our brothers!" He forbids them from returning fire on other Italians.
And he gets shot.
He takes a bullet in the foot. Garibaldi fu ferito. Garibaldi was wounded. Became a famous nursery rhyme. He's arrested by the government he founded and briefly imprisoned. It was a national humiliation, but it also proved his ultimate integrity. He would rather be shot himself than be the cause of a civil war.
He eventually gets pardoned, goes back to his farm. But he tries again for Rome, doesn't he?
He does in 1867. Another failed attempt that's stopped by papal and French troops at the Battle of Mentana. There's also his famous one-word telegram during the Third War of Independence in 1866. He was winning in the Trentino region, and the government ordered him to stop his advance. He just replied with a single word, "Obbedisco," I obey.
Loyalty to the nation, even when he disagreed with its leaders.
Exactly. Yeah. But then we get to 1870, the Franco-Prussian War. This one always confused me. France has been the main antagonist in his story for 20 years. They took Nice, they defended the Pope in Rome. So why does he suddenly go to fight for France? Because the situation changed. In 1870, Napoleon III is defeated and captured by the Prussians. His empire collapses, and France declares itself a republic. The Third Republic.
And for Garibaldi, principle always trumps a personal grudge.
Always. He saw a new sister republic being attacked by the Prussian monarchy. So the old man, he's in his 60s now, crippled by arthritis and old wounds. He often has to be carried on a stretcher. He goes to France with his sons and volunteers.
And he's still an effective commander.
Incredibly. He's given command of a makeshift army called the Army of the Vosges. And in a war that was a total disaster for France, Garibaldi's army is one of the only French forces to win any significant tactical victories against the Prussians. Even in old age, he was unstoppable.
That's just an unbelievable level of consistency in his character.
It is. And in his final years back on Caprera, his political views just got more radical. He openly supported the Paris Commune, he declared himself a socialist, and supported the First International.
And he was, throughout all this, intensely anti-clerical.
Fiercely. He called the papacy the most harmful of all secret societies, and the Pope the genius of evil for Italy. He was a deeply spiritual man in his own way. He believed in a kind of universal God, but he absolutely despised the institution of the Catholic Church, which he believed had kept Italy backward and divided for centuries.
Which brings us to his death in 1882. And even in death, there's a final, sad irony.
He left very clear, very specific instructions in his will. He wanted a simple cremation on his farm on Caprera, on an open-air pyre built of aromatic woods. He wanted his ashes to be scattered. A very simple, almost pagan farewell.
And the Italian state had other ideas.
The state said, absolutely not. This man is a national monument. We can't just burn him on a bonfire. So they ignored his will. They gave him a massive, pompous state funeral, and they entombed him in a heavy granite sarcophagus on Caprera.
It was the exact opposite of what he wanted.
Exactly what he would have hated. He wanted to be free and return to nature, and they trapped him under tons of stone to turn him into a tourist attraction.
A final, frustrating irony for a man who valued simplicity so much.
It really is. I suppose that's the price you pay for becoming a father of the fatherland. You don't really belong to yourself anymore. You belong to the nation and its myths.
So, if we try to pull all these threads together, the great British historian A.J.P. Taylor wrote that Garibaldi was the only wholly admirable figure in modern history. That is incredibly high praise, especially from a cynical historian like Taylor.
It's astounding praise, and I think it comes down to that unique combination of qualities. In battle, he was a lion. He was brave, he was tactically brilliant, he was terrifying to his enemies. But in his personal life, he was a lamb, he was humble, he was gentle, he was completely uncorrupted by money or by power.
And you almost never see those two things in the same person.
Almost never. The person who is brilliant at conquering things is usually also brilliant at holding on to power for themselves. Garibaldi just broke the mold. He was the essential bridge between the intellectual dreamer, Mazzini, and the cold, pragmatic politician, Cavour.
Without him, nothing happens.
Without Garibaldi to actually get on a boat and lead a charge up a hill, Mazzini's ideas would have just stayed as essays and pamphlets, and Cavour's clever diplomacy would have just been notes in a file. Garibaldi made it real.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought, I think. We live in an age where we often demand our heroes be completely pure. We scrutinize their every contradiction. Garibaldi was a walking contradiction.
Absolutely. The man who hated kings created a king of Italy. The man who late in life became a pacifist spent most of his life at war. The man who dreamed of a republic settled for creating a monarchy.
So that's the question for you to think about. Was that pragmatism his greatest strength, that willingness to compromise to get the job done? Or was it a tragedy? Did he sacrifice too much of his own ideal world in order to create the real one?
Because the Italy he helped create was deeply flawed. It was a monarchy, it was poor, it was unequal. It was not the utopia he and Mazzini had dreamed of, but it was united. And maybe, at the end of the day, for the sailor from Nice, that was enough.
It's a fascinating lesson. Sometimes, maybe being a hero means compromising on almost everything except for the one single thing that matters most.
Well said.
We will leave you with that thought to mull over. Thanks for diving deep with us into the wild, improbable, and inspiring life of Giuseppe Garibaldi. We'll catch you on the next deep dive. See you then.